Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching this Salty Sea, and I've got my headphones on today instead of my microphone. And the reason for that is I'm really excited to bring on a guest today. I'm going to be doing some predicting and some wish listing for everything we're going to see in Warcry in 2023. And to help me out, I've brought on a guest to the channel who longtime viewers are probably familiar with. It's Lila, aka Mommy Slanesh, aka Medusa. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Pretty excited for the year ahead. I think if this year is any indication, it's going to be a really good one for Warcry.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how much stuff we got this past year. Just thinking back a year ago, we thought that we would never get a Tome of Champions again because our Tome of Champions was still lost in the mail.
Yep.
We had very little support for quite a while. We were still unboxing Red Harvest, I think, and that box was pretty good. But we got a ton of stuff in 2022. What was your favorite thing we got in 2022?
My favorite thing was probably a combination of the new Chaos Legionnaires warband along with
Hmm.
the Centaurian Marshal. I really love to see them continuing to kind of build on the original three Chaos. I think they're just allies of Chaos now. Those
Hmm.
kind of three original monsters. They're not really monsters
Yeah.
according to the new rules, but just those three original models I thought were some of the best expansions to the original starter set. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to think that maybe we'll get one with each season coming out now.
Hmm. That would be really wonderful to see. I think for me, my favorite was the Toma Champions, just because seeing points changes for the first time, even though those points changes were only in existence for about 6 months before the new edition then came, it turns out that wasn't their fault. They had supply chain issues and they meant for that to
Mhm.
be around for more like 9 or 10 months. And then also getting all the Underworlds fighters, it was incredible to see how excited people were to play with their Underworlds things. So that was pretty cool. I would say for if I have to pick a model or like a physical release that was my favorite, I think I would say the Jade Obelisk. I just really love their aesthetic, kind of everything about them. I wish they'd gotten a Warcry monster like the Centaurian Marshal,
Yeah.
because that would have been really cool. And what I did like about the Marshal and the Legionnaires coming out at the same time was the way they released a monster ally. I should stop saying monsters because even though they are monsters, they're not technically monsters in the game, like you said.
Ugh, I know.
The fact that they released an ally that matched a warband, like kind of just telling you run these two together, and a ton of people have, you see it all the time, I think is really cool. And I hope that they do that again, kind of releasing two
Yeah.
together.
And I just love having so much like Be'lakor. It's
Mm.
one of my favorite like non-Slaneshi characters and models and kind of aesthetics, just like that very classic demon. He's got like some cool like shadowy themes too. So seeing like these legionnaires and this marshal that have like the armor with the Be'lakor faces on it, it's just really awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And what's your least favorite?
I mean, you already know this.
Yeah, I know. I'm just
It's
setting you
the
up.
it's the Chimera. It's the Chimera and just monsters in general. Going back to my most favorite, I think monsters just completely, in a lot of cases, completely invalidate those original Chaos allies. I think Dragon Maul is overpowered. I think the Chimera as a whole is overpowered. And I think they're really just like these big, stupid models that make the game kind of all about them, even if they're not particularly good, like stats wise, or like,
Hmm.
if they don't, even if they don't win you the game, your opponent still has to sink like so much time into either avoiding them or locking them down or killing them that it just
Hmm.
centers the game entirely on this monster that's kind of just screaming me, me, me.
Yeah.
And I don't love when like the game is centered on like this one big model. And I think they're also just a little bit too big, the base sizes and just the model in general. They're just a little too big and don't really vibe with the rest of what Warcry is going for. If they were like a challenge battle for narrative or like for narrative play, if you like defeat one and then capture it, like I think that's cool and fine, but I don't really I don't really know why we're doing this in like competitive, honestly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel the way you do. I do know some folks who think that it fits the Gur theme really well, but I do definitely agree with the fact that when one person has a monster and the other doesn't, the whole game is about how can the person without the monster minimize its effectiveness. I definitely agree with that. And even when you play against a monster that's not a chimera, that's still definitely true. So yeah, I get why it's not everyone's cup of tea. Um, I think if I have a least favorite, let's see. I guess it might be reactions. I was really excited to build
Yeah.
around them at first, and I don't hate that they exist. I think it's cool to Warcry needed a new wrinkle.
Hmm.
Um, but reactions don't feel like the wrinkle I wanted. Not every warband uses them or cares about them. Uh, only the only time you ever care about reactions is if you have like 12 or more models. Um, that's not completely true. They're actually really impactful in narrative. Something that I kind of underestimated at first. I think they're really cool in narrative because of the way you can spend renown on them. But other than the way they work in narrative, I don't like how they work in matched play. And it's interesting that both of us, our favorite thing was, or sorry, our least favorite thing was something that works pretty well in narrative, but not in competitive play. Um,
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting I don't know if we can use it as a as kind of a looking glass into what the rules writers' minds were at when they were created this edition, but um, doesn't feel like a coincidence.
Yeah. And I think for, kind of expanding off of what you said for reactions, I think they're just like they overly punish. I think we've gone, and I think in a lot of ways 2.0 is almost an overcorrection from 1.0, where we
Hmm.
see a lot of which is nice because it means the developers are actually paying attention to like what's
Yep.
broken in the game. But you see in 1.0, it was war cry, chaff cry, basically,
Yeah.
where everyone was running all these little like 50 to 70 point dudes. And now it's like monster cry. So
Hmm.
everyone's running a lot of, and they buffed toughness, and they buffed strength as well. I think those things are like way more impactful now,
Yep.
partially just because of how they pointed them, but also the universal reaction counter, I think, is way too good for what it is.
It weirdly punishes so like they buff toughness, right? And one of the things that should counter really high toughness isn't strength because you're not going to have the higher strength, but it should actually be really low strength. So like
Yep.
strength 3 is supposed to be kind of a counter to toughness 6 because you're pointed like you're only hitting on fives and sixes anyway. So something like a demonet should kind of shred through things like Stormcast. And points wise, demonets and they don't actually do badly against something like Stormcast. But it's really hard to play some of the high attack, low strength factions because if you run into a faction with numbers, uh, you are just completely blown off the table. I've heard a number of people complain with Daughters of Cain that they have this problem. Um, I did some I've been scraping tournament data lately, and Daughters of Cain are kind of struggling a little bit, and I've heard a lot of sort of anecdotal complaints where they have so many attacks and they're so like crit fishy, they have the low strength that they'll routinely take more damage than they deal when they are fighting chaff models, especially any kind of cheap toughness 4 thing. Daughters of Cain just immediately lose, which I think is kind of too bad, or at least not what they intended, which I I don't hate reactions. Again, I think they needed to add a new wrinkle, so might as well try this. But I just hope that the next time we see them add a new wrinkle for an edition, I hope it involves removing reactions and doing something else.
Yeah, or even just fixing how reactions work. I don't think that
Hmm.
counter should necessarily be a. I think there's too much kind of, and I think it stems from like an overreaction to 1.0 where we have these like situations where a lot of times a unit is just getting kind of alpha, like quad rampage, alpha striked off the board before it
Yeah,
gets to do anything.
that's true.
But I
Hmm.
think that we just have so many reactions that basically say like react, deal free damage essentially most of the time because like statistically counter is always I don't know what the exact number is, but I
Hmm.
mean statistically counter is usually doing at least one damage.
Yeah.
Um and I think that yeah, um having such a big flip is interesting from 1.0 to 2.0, but I also wonder if 2.0 players feel similarly, having never experienced 1.0, or if it's, I think things are problems, but there could also be a side of it where like both of us have played a lot of 1.0 and like theory
Hmm.
crafted and pointed for 1.0.
Yeah.
So some amount of growing pains coming over and kind of learning the revamped system.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think I wonder if competitive players who are new also just forget their reactions less often. Because one thing I've noticed is that people forget their reactions a lot.
All the
And
time.
and that people who played in 1.0 forget their reactions constantly.
Yes.
Uh, which it's is a skill tester, is valid, competitively very valid. One of the biggest weaknesses in my game right now is that I forget reactions too much. Um, but I don't know if it's a great sign for the rule either, if
Yeah,
people are forgetting. Anyway, we're going on way too much about
we
something
are.
that's not the purpose of this video at
Oh,
all,
for
but
sure. I will say in closing, though, I wish that they had kept reactions the same way that they had them. And I think this was in 21. Maybe it was in TOC 20, the pit fight where you use singles to
oh,
spend for a reaction.
yeah.
I thought that would have been great.
Agreed, because it gives more texture to the dice rolls where no dice roll is necessarily much better than another dice roll, whereas right now you're often just really screaming to get a specific roll on your opening dice. Yeah.
And it changes the resource. And it
Hmm.
changes the resource and action economy to something that I think is better than just like, oh, my chaff guy's probably not going to activate again, so I'm going to get these free points of damage on your model.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, moving on.
Yeah. So let's actually do our predicting and wish listing for the rest of season one of 2.0 of Warcry. So right now I've got on the screen the three box set names that we know are coming. Sorry, the two that we know are coming. We've already gotten Sundered Fate, which was Tzeentch versus Seraphon. And the next two we're getting are Blood Hunt and Nightmare Quest. I've heard some good speculation around this. There's a newish YouTube channel about that's often about Warcry called Hobby Jackal that has a really great speculation video about this for people who want to check that out. Someone who's done a lot of sleuthing. Um, but what are you thinking that we'll get for? Let's start with Blood Hunt. What does that kind of make you think of? What do you think we're going to get? And then
Um,
later we'll get to what we want to get.
yeah. Uh, I mean, going to like vote, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the pattern that people are seeing is likely there, which is that each of these boxes, if we go back and also include Heart of Gur, which has Rotmire Creed, that each of these boxes have a bespoke one of the main four Chaos God warband aligned warbands, and then something else.
Yeah.
So for Blood Hunt, I know the most common thing that I've seen people speculate is Corn v Flesh Eater Courts, I believe.
Hmm.
I think mostly maybe because Flesh Eater Courts has their quad is the Royal Hunt or the Wild Hunt or something like that.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of it
Um,
that way. Oh, that's a good,
yeah.
yeah, that's a good call out. Okay.
So I think that I know I've also seen people pointing to maybe ogres,
Mm,
which also kind of have a blood or a um what's the word?
yeah,
I
they're
mean, a
into
blood or like
eating,
a
they're into,
hunting. I mean, there
mm-hmm,
are hunters again
yep.
in that with like man trappers, icebrow hunters, things like that. And then lastly, if we go more off of blood, like I would love to see a Corn versus Daughters of Cain thing,
Oh,
because of
yeah.
how thematically similar those factions are for being on
Mm-hmm,
kind of two different ends of the uh, order chaos spectrum.
yep.
But I think that's pretty unlikely just because we already have a bespoke Daughters of Cain warband in the
Right.
Cainite Shadow Stalkers.
Yeah. I love that you said ogres because one, you're right, they have hunters. Two, it wouldn't be that much less likely than Flesh Eater Courts because ogres got a recent book. Um, I feel like it's definitely not a coincidence that Blood Hunt is scheduled to come out around when we'll get to this in another slide, but there are strong rumors that a Corn book is coming out around that time.
Mhm.
And I've heard that there might be a Flesh Eater Courts book coming out soon-ish, but the fact that this is kind of coming not that long after an Ogre book also I think gives us some real food for thought there. Um, Rotmire Creed being the first one to come out when Nurgle got their book 6 months before that box, I think
Right.
kind of gives some hints there as to how they do things. I know for Kill Team, they did a box of Chaos Space Marines versus Eldar that was 1 month on the heels of a 40K box of Chaos Space Marines versus Eldar, which I think is kind of overkill, but just because I think it's a bad decision doesn't mean that it will be, and they've certainly shown other times that they're willing to treat kind of Warcry releases and Kill Team releases as kind of a one hat fits all sort of situation.
Yeah.
What would you want to see from, since we're definitely in agreement on corn, we're both pretty convinced about corn, right? What
Mhm.
would you want to see um, in a corn warband?
Honestly, I would like to see something with a little bit more restraint.
Okay.
Um, so maybe something that explores the because I think what was really cool about the Nurgle and the Tzeentch boxes is that the
Hmm.
Tzeentch one wasn't just wizards, it was like
Yeah.
these cool and it still embodied Tzeentch's theme, but it did so in a very different way from what we normally see from Tzeentch.
Yeah.
And same with the Rotmire Creed. They're very different while still really embodying Nurgle's theme, but they're not like these big, like the Blight Kings, the mortals that we usually see are these kind of big, bespoke like grand
Yeah.
warriors who are just really big and like bloated and have all this heavy armor, and then the Rotmire Creed is more like kind of guerrilla tactics,
Fit
like
swamp
swamp folk.
nomads. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think out of Corn I would want to see something that more kind of leaned into the idea of the honorable
Hmm.
warrior, the come challenge me, like accepting a challenge, like one-on-one combat, kind of like honorable combat,
Yeah.
as opposed to I think what we've mostly gotten out of Corn, which is a bunch of things that would fit at pretty much any death metal poster. um,
Yeah.
and I mean, like, that's fun too, all the blood and skulls and rage, but I would love to see something that went in more of the direction of like come like fighters just trying to prove their honor and their skill,
Hmm.
um and like kind of being a little bit more like classic military martial about it.
Yeah, you get some very small hints of that throughout, like Corn battle tomes and things like that. And I think that that's Corn at its most compelling, because the I mean, just the joke of Corn of everything being like Blood Skull Ravagers as their name. I mean, Corn names are so ridiculous and,
Right.
like you said, so over the top. It's hard to relate to Corn, and as a result, the intensity of it can become boring. Um, I've always really found Corn at its most compelling when it's figuring out the reasons why Korn doesn't like Slaanesh and Tzeentch,
Yeah.
where like Tzeentch offends Korn's sense of fair play, which is so interesting because Korn never has a sense of fair play any other time except for against Tzeentch. Um, and then Slaanesh uh, is like is so similar to Korn in so many ways and yet so different. And it's like Korn gets so hung up on the few differences that they get really mad about it, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, I mean, this is
I
almost me wishing for like a top-down rethink of just how Korn mortals work
yeah.
overall, because I don't find the current mortal range very compelling. And I have a ton of Korn demons. I love Korn demons. There's something,
Oh, me
um,
too. I
yeah,
also really love corn demons.
there's something about the design of the bloodletter and that ludicrous head that all the bloodletters have, that I find really compelling. And then, of course, the new Fleshhound sculpts are just incredible. They're my
Oh, they're
favorite.
yeah,
They're my favorite
fantastic.
Warhammer dog by a lot.
Corn
Um,
dogs.
yeah, exactly. So I love the demons, and I do wish that I was more compelled by the humans.
Yeah.
Shout us.
I think sorry, I think Knights of Corn versus I think like
Mm,
the kind of like perversion of the idea of honorable combat by
yeah.
chaos as Knights of Corn versus the perversion of like honor in death as like deluded knights of flesh eater courts would be a
Okay.
really cool box.
That would, okay. This is starting to make sense as a, yeah, as a whole theme. Because they're all just going on this like royal hunt together, like the king and his men at arms and the whole medieval spiel that got King Robert killed. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's like Korn's version versus Flesh Eater Quartz's version. That would be
Yeah, they
cool.
both view each other as the quarry.
Yes, absolutely. All right. I think we got to a really good place with this.
Yeah.
GW, if your plans were different than that, we're just going to need you to resculpt some things. And yeah, so then Nightmare Quest. Nightmare Quest will be coming out in the summer sometime, is what it sounds like. So it certainly won't be during the 40K release that's going to be half of the summer, but they'll sneak it
Ugh.
in there at some point in the summer. Um, what are you thinking? Are you thinking they're going to complete the set of Chaos Gods, or do you think they'll go in a different direction and try to surprise us? What do you think we'll see?
I mean, given my favorite chaos god is Slanesh, I would love to see
Mm-hmm.
uh Slanesh in this. And again, kind of like the other ones, I would love to see Slanesh explored in a different facet from what we have now, which is kind of half this like 1980s idea of Slanesh being like Cenobite, I get for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a more family friendly term. Let's
Prince
say
themed.
yeah,
Artist formerly
sure,
known as Prince themed.
sure, that. And then kind of just entirely just speed,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of the newer Slanesh stuff plays into.
Yeah.
I would love to see the name Nightmare Quest makes me think I would love to see, Slanesh is probably maybe Zinj as well, but I feel like Slanesh is the one that has the most space to play around with in
Are you gonna
terms
say
of
Freaky Wizards? Oh no. Okay.
dreams and
Okay. Sure.
visions and
Mm-hmm.
like dream well, I was actually going there too, like dream wizards.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And like maybe we could see something like the Jade Obelisk got, where it has like its own kind of unique demon that
Right.
has a sculpt as well, like
Mm-hmm.
some sort of dream demon. Uh,
Yeah.
like the original concepts for like a succubus or an incubus is that they're a demon that infiltrates dreams,
Right,
essentially.
right. That they don't have to
Um,
it becoming sex later as a weird misinterpretation is a fascinating parallel for how the community has taken Slanesh as well.
for sure.
Um,
So I my wish list for Nightmare Quest is Slanesh sleep paralysis demons.
ooh, okay.
Maybe not demon, but like that general vibe.
So I went in a similar, slightly different direction, but we're definitely sort of picking up the same ideas here. So I was thinking, kind of like you were, we need to see a new side of each Chaos God with these, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of people cry out for the kind of Lord Glutos gluttony version of Slanesh, but I don't see it. Like, yes, there's room for Lord Glutoses in Slanesh, but it doesn't feel like the most compelling thing for me. It feels like a good one-off. Um, so I was thinking wizardry because yes, it makes sense that Tzeentch would be the most wizard-like, but um, Slanesh is really into being tricky and being maybe less tricksy than Tzeentch, but being fancy. And magic is pretty fancy. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be real. And Slanesh loves perfecting a craft, and magic is something that takes ages to learn, right? So any Slanesh fencer, like Sigvald spending, decades and decades becoming the perfect fencer is not that different from a wizard spending decades and decades in the library uh, learning all their spells.
Mhm.
And so I love the dream direction you took with it. And then I was thinking nightmares in terms of Gloomspite gets
Ooh.
as the enemy. And we just got these like knights that are kind of questing a little bit too with Gloomspite, which kind of preempted my idea for them, to be honest. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't be the first time when they've done a Underworlds warband that kind of fit a Warcry warband's aesthetic. Um, see, obviously they did K-Night Shadowstalkers in Underworlds. The
Mhm.
Gnarl Spirit pack came out and um, it's got some kind of, or is it Gnarl Spirit and also Thedra's crew
Yeah.
both
The
feel,
Dark Oath,
yeah, they
the
both
Dark
feel
Oath
exactly like
Savagers.
Dark Oath Savagers.
Yep.
Um, and so I want to see sort of the expansion of this Loon Court, but not actually, that character's Loon Court, but these sort of again, still psychedelic because that's a Gloomspite gets thing, but sort of maybe the Merlin angle to the Loon Court, um, I just think would be really cool, and I think it would fit with kind of magical, sort of wizard Slanesh kind of faction.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say for Wizard Slanesh too, like a lot of times, I think Slanesh is the chaos god that kind of plays the most into that kind of deal with the devil space around like summoning demons.
Yeah,
And like the be careful what you wish for. So and like wizardry, like magic, sorcery is often connected to like summoning otherworld entities like demons and
yeah.
like making deals with demons. So I could see that playing into it.
The old kind of ritual with chalk lines on the floor thing is whenever Warhammer does it, it's usually Chaos Undivided demons,
Yeah,
but it feels the kind of impulses behind it feel the most Slanesh to me. I think I agree with you there.
definitely.
Um, I I know I've heard some people say that because there's no Slanesh symbol on the map right now, that means that there's a solid chance that Slanesh doesn't get completed here. I would be heartbroken if that's true, and my one
Me
defense
too.
to that is that Sundered Fate added like 4 locations to the map, so they might just be slow playing it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
It'd also be
who
really
knows?
weird, and, like, I would definitely feel pretty offended
Yeah.
if 3 of the 4 Chaos Gods get this cool bespoke warband, and then they're just like, "Sorry, Slaanesh, you're just gonna eternally pay for the sins of the contorted epitome forever."
Yeah. Slanesh, you've been demoted to sit with the great horned rat
Oh
and Hashut.
god, sometimes it
Oh,
does
that'd be
feel like
terrible.
that.
It does sometimes, yeah, yeah. Um, all right, so before we get too much into that pain, let's talk about the AOS roadmap. I don't want to talk about it the way kind of AOS players talk about what to expect from each battle tome,
Yeah.
etc. I more want to talk about what we'd get for Warcry with it. Um, we've heard, so I'm just going to piggyback first of all on just what I've heard from a lot of AOS talking heads, is that we're looking at probably Khorne and Slaanesh for the Chaos Battle Tome seems to be their consensus. Um, and then for Order, I've heard that it's oh, hold on, I take that back. Let's go to Death first, where we might have Soulblight Gravelords and Flesh Eater Courts coming out. And then I've heard that the summer order box is going to be the Cities of Sigmar rework. And
Right.
I haven't heard anything about the spring uh, order battle tome. Have you heard much about the spring battle tome
Um,
for order?
I don't think so. I would have to look at the numbers. I'm not too involved. I know, so the reasoning I know behind why some of these ones are getting estimated is because for example, for the Corn and Slanesh ones, they think it's that because those with Chaos getting the Beast of Chaos battle tome,
Mm-hmm.
and the Slaves to Darkness battle tome, that leaves, and I fact check me in the comments on this, but I've heard this a lot. That leaves Khorne and Slanesh as the last two that don't have an updated battle tome for 3.0. Because I think Khorne hasn't gotten a book in a while, and
Right.
Slanesh's battle tome came out like I want to say like maybe 6 months before AOS 3.0 dropped.
Okay.
So those it's just a by process of elimination.
And they both
Um,
have super weird AOS books right now too that I think a lot of
yeah,
people don't like, which I think makes them a good
I
fit also.
I've yet to find one person who likes the Slanesh AOS battle tome. Currently, it's very
Yeah, I
bad.
think you're right. There are some sickos who like the corn one, but they're in the small minority, but they do
Mhm.
exist. But yeah, the Slanesh one seems to be universally hated.
Slanesh
Um,
one, it's not to get too into AOS. It's just bad. Like it's just bad, but also it's not interesting or fun to play either.
mhm.
So it's bad and it's clunky and it's unfun. So he's
Yeah.
literally just, except for the art and the lore, there's just no redeeming qualities to
Oh
it.
no. That's terrible. Um, so I'll start with things that we know are coming and that we've seen the Gloomspite gets wolves and we've seen
Mhm.
the Ogroids. And those are just like straight down the middle types of units that you would see in Warcry. So do you have any kind of expectations or wishes for, what you want from them mechanically?
Absolutely. I think if we'd done this video last year or maybe the year before, I think if we'd
Mm-hmm.
done this video in 1.0, but especially before Bladeborn came out and like the Tome of Champions 2021
Mm-hmm.
Underworlds Warbands rules,
Yeah.
one of the things I really wanted was Gitz Wolf Riders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I really like that aesthetic and I really like Rippus Snarlfangs as an aesthetic.
Yeah.
I would hope that they're good in Warcry, given what we've seen from mounted units and also kind of going off of where Git Spider Riders are at. I'm not holding my breath.
Same. Big mounted heroes have been pretty good in this edition, but smaller mounted units have really not.
Smaller
Um,
mounted units are, I can think of, the only one that I can think of that's any good whatsoever is I actually run him, the Cold One Rider. I think he's called a Drake Spawn Knight from Cities of Sigmar because he's
oh,
really
interesting.
good. he's really good with the Anvil Guard triple that gives you like an extra attack, and then for if it has damage on it, it also gives you like extra damage. He's just kind of
Sure.
good for like getting in there.
Mm-hmm.
And even he, like I, in my own play, he's mine has developed a reputation of like running in somewhere and immediately dying. So yeah, and
Okay.
that's yeah, I wouldn't say I can't think of, and we might both be wrong, but I can't think of a cavalry unit under 200 points that's even worth considering.
It's pretty bleak, and I think part of it is that they've never really figured out how to implement damage on the charge well.
Yeah,
That triple that a ton of warbands have, it's you use it like when you use it sometimes when your warband has access to it, but you're never excited about it. It's never been the reason someone took a model. Um,
for sure.
and it just seems like cavalry and AOS is so dependent on hitting hard on the charge that I mean it's just this like that's just the mechanic they've held themselves to, um, even though it's not necessarily what horses were always used for in actual medieval warfare, but it's the mechanic that they've held themselves to, for like this is what cavalry does in our war games, and they
Yep.
just haven't the implementation in Warcry just isn't very clean, which is too bad.
I
So
think it should. I feel like you could almost attach a rule to the rune mark for it, but again, that's probably getting into too much kind of fan balancing.
yeah, yeah. But certainly something I'll wish list for not in 2.0, but when we ever get to 3.0, let's figure something out about how we're going to do
Reword
cavalry.
cavalry.
Yeah.
Um,
At least the
Ogroids.
cavalry heroes are good now. But
That's
yeah,
true.
let's get into
Yep.
Ogroids.
Ogroids. Oh man. I've seen a lot of people wish listing these, especially from the Discord. Shout
Hmm.
out.
Yeah.
As you know, three of them with the Ogroid leader, and then the Ogroid Myrmidon and the Zinch Thaumaturge, I think he is,
Yeah.
and just do mono Ogroids.
If the points don't work out to just have 5 Ogroids and that's your whole warband, I'll be really heartbroken.
Same.
So I was actually in the Discord, trying to work backwards to figure out what it would take, like points cost wise. So I was thinking like if you had 150 point Ogroids and then a 200 point leader, that would fit with the Thaumaturge and the Myrmidon. 150 points seems a little cheap for how big and strong those guys look, though.
I
So
very much doubt it.
yeah,
Just because if you look at like something that would be in like maybe I would say the lower end of what you could expect from the weight class of a model like that, if you look, which would be, in my opinion, like Slangor Fiend Bloods.
yeah,
I
those are
think these are going to
175.
end up
Yeah.
being tougher and stronger than Slangor Fiend Bloods.
Hmm.
And those are at, I believe, 175 for a basic unit.
They are, and they're a lot like Bulgors, which are kind of again in that same weight class.
Yep.
And those, again, the cheapest one is 175. The leader is 245. I think that's probably what we should expect. Or oh, you're probably right. Probably a good 20 points more than that. Like they'll have a lot of wounds, a lot of just general chonk to them.
Yeah.
Um, if the Myrmidon comes in at 265, I would bet we see the leader be somewhere more like 240. Because he can't be bigger than the Myrmidon, right? I don't know.
He could be.
Is he? Okay.
Um, I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen the model in person. I don't know what he looks like, but I could see an argument for the leader being, I mean, I guess that would be also kind of Myrmidon in that same range. I
Yeah.
could see an argument for like the leader is probably going to be templated along the lines of the Myrmidon or the Doom Bull.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are probably the two like most similar units to look to for that type of model.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Thaumaturge being at 225 kind of gives me some hope that they could be cheaper. Um, but I really don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. We'll just
I
have to
think
wait and see.
regardless, I think they'll be cool. And Slaves to Darkness doesn't have anything that's exactly in that niche, so it works for them too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, what would you want for heroes for some of the other AOS factions that we might be seeing coming up? Let's start since we're both pretty confident we're going to get a Khorne versus Slaanesh box. I've we've seen a silhouette that is probably the Slaanesh leader, although it could potentially be an Underworlds model. And we've seen a silhouette that kind of looks like a kind of down the line Khorne leader as well.
Mhm.
But like, what would you want out of leaders from those factions?
Oh gosh. I mean, what I wanted for a Slaanesh leader was just for them to revamp and update the old Chaos Lord and Demonic Mount model,
Okay.
the
Yep.
Boob Snake.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most likely, assuming that the model that we saw was in fact a Slaanesh model, I would like a cheap leader that buffs Slaanesh unit or like that buffs units in some
Mm-hmm.
meaningful way that is not +1 strength to bring their strength up to average for a triple, which I use that ability embarrassingly often because of how necessary it sometimes feels in
Mm-hmm.
2.0.
Yeah.
Um, and the only like really like decent buff that Slanesh had like for buffing your own models, because there seems to be this like idea that Slanesh should be able to demonette swarm, and we have like the Infernal and Raptress or the Shard Speaker that kind of
Mm-hmm.
speak to like running a bunch of these little chaff models.
Right.
Um And it seems like what they're missing is like something that gives attacks or strength. And they had the Lord of Pain, but then that also, both that and then the Contorted Epitome, like both those abilities went up to be quads,
Mm-hmm.
which are
Yeah.
just so much less reliable.
Yeah.
So I'd
And
like to
also
see
they
like a little
compete with
foot hero.
Rampage. And are you ever going to use it over Rampage? I mean, you will sometimes, but
Exactly.
usually not. Hmm.
Usually not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably, again, this is solely going off the assumption that that silhouette that we saw, which looked like kind of that smaller figure with a
Mm-hmm.
kind of looked like some sort of like light armored warrior with like a dagger and a some like some ornamentation or like I don't know, like backpack something
Mm-hmm.
coming out of it.
Yeah.
Going off of that, I would like to see. I think we have so much disruption already in Slanesh that I would like to see something if you want to go a completely different route and say, hey, I just want to spam as many demonettes or even as many of these like little homunculus dudes as possible
Uh-huh.
or bliss barb archers, like whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. Like I want to spam these units and just
Mm-hmm.
like Zerg rush. And I
Yeah.
want a leader that enables that play style because I think that it's kind of one of the like hanging question marks for Slanesh, especially when you
Mm-hmm.
start looking into like lead from the back leaders. But I don't think that we have anything in faction that is like pointed correctly, sized correctly, or with like the correct ability to really enable that to be a list.
Yeah. So the thing I've been hoping for, which I think that silhouette means we just can't get. But the thing I was hoping for was so the Lord of Pain feels kind of just vanilla to me. Like it feels like you took the like I've got the Ego Pomp here and the Pain Master, and it looks like you took someone and just split these two down the middle and
Yeah.
ended up with the Lord of Pain. The Lord of Pain is actually a little bit more naked than these two. He weirdly doesn't fit that well, actually, with them. You can tell they're sort of on the same team, but he doesn't really fit the theme that well when you put him next to the armor people. So I'd been hoping for a like twin soul leader, like we've got the ego pomp. I was hoping for a triple soul. Um, but the silhouette is too skinny for that. But what I
Yeah.
really want is something that does the foot hero version of what you see from Varengard, Achillean Kings, and what's the Flesh Eater Courts one? The Vargulf, where sort of like I guess Stormcast have this in the Knight Zephyros. I was hoping for a Slaanesh Knight Zephyros, something on move 5 that's running forward and then self-buffing a ton of attacks. That would feel really Slaanesh-y as far as um, sort of getting super into the moment and going all out for one, you know, one dice roll
Hmm.
essentially. Um,
Yeah.
I was really hoping for that, but we're not going to get that with the skinny one.
Yeah.
My prediction, even though I'd prefer to see what you asked for, my prediction is this is a Bliss Barb hero, like a
Yeah.
Bliss Barb higher Temptress, or
Yeah.
even more tempting Bliss Barb. Um, I'm guessing that's what we're gonna see. I'm not upset about that, but it does feel a little weird to me because Bliss Barbs are supposedly the lowest ranking troops.
Yeah, and I think there's a good chance as well, I will say, and I think this is on the next slide coming up. Uh, I can say with almost 100% certainty, if that model isn't Slanesh, it's Dark Elves, and
Yeah,
it's for Underworld. And I think I keep getting split between do I base my like wish list off of this silhouette, or I waffle on that a lot over whether that might be a dark elf instead.
I would love for that to be a dark elf for the frustrating parallels between Slaanesh and the elves to continue.
Yes.
One of the things I love about Marathi's character uh, is she can't look in the mirror without like just seething because she sees her tormentor in herself. I don't love it in that I'm like super into her having to feel that pain. I love it in terms of it's just really compelling.
It's
Um,
cool. Yeah.
and
And I
I'd love.
love those themes.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
love that, like, and it makes sense because, like, all the elves, from my understanding of Age of Sigmar lore, all the elves that aren't Sylvaneth do come from Slanesh,
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially.
They hate him, but they can't get away from. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Which
Mm-hmm.
is a really cool kind of inversion of how it works in 40K, where Slanesh came along and like ate a bunch of elves. And in this one, he kind of did that at the end times, but then in Age of Sigmar, he puked up a bunch of elves instead.
Yeah. Yeah. And how in 40K the elves birthed Slaanesh, and
Yeah.
in AOS, uh, Slaanesh birthed the elves is, like you said, a cool inversion.
Yeah.
Um, do you think there's any space left for a cool corn foot hero?
Uh,
That's kind of a mean question to just
for
drop on somebody with no
for
warning.
demons,
Okay, I agree with that.
I
I very much agree with that.
actually yes, actually yes, I do. I'm gonna tell you why.
Okay.
Um, I don't think they would do this because I think they want to keep this unique to death. Although
hmm
Tarantula's Brood got something similar. I think that there's a world in which you could have a corn hero that was so angry that he compelled other corn units to be too angry to die
Okay.
and had like the necromancer triple and
hmm
like had them stand back up.
Okay. The
I think
Necromancer
that would
triple on
be
Blood Warriors would be so brutal. Wow.
yeah. I think that would be maybe the only thing left for a Cornfoot hero. And again,
hmm
I don't know how likely that is because even if you do flavor it as like he's encouraging them to not die, that's almost too close to like magic, which Corn
hmm
hates.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
hmm
so yeah, I don't know. Cornfoot hero, my guess is he's going to be another big meathead with a mid-range attacks and HP profile.
Yeah. th- there's so many of them. A bunch of them are decent. I mean, there's a lot of corn foot heroes that don't suck in Warcry. There's a few that do suck, but it's it's just kind of a mess. Now they do have some cool abilities. I think the Bloodstoker has a cool ability. The
Mhm.
Bloodsecrator used to have a cool ability that now sucks and is really too bad. Um, but yeah, I can't co-sign anything that's not a Valkia or a Scylla and Fulgrim. How do you pronounce that guy's name?
Scylla Amphalgrim, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Amphalgrim,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah. Either it has to be one of those two, in my opinion. If it's not one of those two, I just I can't co-sign any of it. Unless it's a demon hero, like you said. The demon corn dogs have a really cool named hero,
Yeah.
Karanak. It'd be nice to
I
see
yeah. I
something new
doubt
for
it's a
them.
demon. I doubt it's corn demons just because
Mm,
we already had the corn demons versus Slanesh demons box. So if
that's
they're
true.
doing another one, and with the way that the Slanesh release lines up, where
Hmm.
the most recent things that we've gotten, kind of the pivoting direction that we've gotten towards Slanesh is towards these like Painbringers and Bliss Barbs and whatnot. I think
Yeah,
it's likely mortals versus mortals.
yeah, yeah. I think that's
Um,
probably true.
but yeah, I mean, a corn demon hero with an actual ability would be great.
Hmm.
One day.
Yeah, yeah. The uh, the non-unique one. Well, I can't talk about corn demons anymore. So death and
Yeah,
order
moving on.
wishes. We can run through these quickly because I don't think we're nearly as sure about them. But I've
Yeah,
heard rumors about mid-sized ghouls that are bigger than those 55-point ghouls, but smaller than the 160-point ghouls. And all I can say is I think that that would fit great with,
I think that'd be a great idea.
yeah.
Flesh Eater Quartz. Definitely, and this isn't necessarily always a problem on the tabletop in like a competitive game, but it is
Hmm.
definitely a problem for I think builders and painters and narrative players.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of unique flesh eater quartz options. It's pretty
Yeah.
much your like three sizes of this, and then your three sizes of that, and your three sizes of another thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think that like you have your ghouls, your yeah, I think there's definitely room for more variety in flesh eater quartz, and I think that's definitely something that both like AOS players and Warcry players will love is if there's more flesh eater court, just variety, and you can take kind of a mixture of different models.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, I've definitely seen flesh eater. I've heard people talk about it, and like I have a unpainted currently Flesh Eater Quartz warband, and I think they're just kind of very samey.
Yeah. I have that problem with looking at them too. Now, what I enjoy looking at is different than what I enjoy painting. I actually really liked painting my Flesh Eater Quartz, um, but I don't enjoy looking at them at all.
Yeah,
So I hope that there's something about these models that's a little bit more fun to look at. Their lore is so cool, and then the models have so little, there's very little about it that isn't just something you could find on a third-party website, um,
yep.
that I'd like to see. I'd like to see something else or something more for Flesh Eater Courts. The new guy that they put on the throne was not a good sign to me. Um, but
No, more
the
of the same.
Yeah, the Archregent I did like. I liked how he had some armor on. I liked that his wings were weird. They started at his uh wrist and went to his elbow, and that was it. He had these just sort of like almost like mini jump gliding wings or something, which I thought were pretty cool. So I liked him a lot. I thought that was a cool evolution. And I was kind of sad to see that they weren't kind of continuing to push the envelope with those.
Yeah, I think as far as Flesh Eater Quartz goes, the highlights for me are that guy, like you just said. I like him
Hmm.
pretty much for all the same reasons you were talking about, and then like the Underworlds warband with like kind of the ghoul heroes that like this one wears armor, and this one is like the leader and has like a halberd and like kind of distinguishing the ghouls from one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people really liked that warband too. I think that was one
Yeah.
of the more popular Beastgrave ones.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see like kind of a bigger like an alternate or like a pointed up ghoul
Mm-hmm.
um unit, just because I think people really do kind of want that like foot soldier diversity.
Yeah, because they've got their peasants and they've got their knights, but they don't have their men-at-arms. So it
Yep,
just seems like they should have that. Yeah. The
absolutely.
final thing for AOS battle tomes that we think we're getting, um, we might end up disagreeing on this. Is there anything that you're excited about that you could see for a Dawnbringer Crusade, Cities of Sigmar kind of release
Um,
later in the year?
I would love if they just reworked Cities of Sigmar overall. I
Mm-hmm.
think Cities of Sigmar is a really interesting idea to have this kind of one faction that's split into like five different factions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just implemented a little bit poorly. I skim over most of the cities, to be honest. I think there's like one or two. I think each city has like one or two interesting abilities, but I think that making the rest of the abilities, they can all be the same, but they're all so generic.
Yep.
Like, oh, here's my big dude that has the double that adds damage to his critical hits. And here's my cavalry option that has the standard done to death cavalry charge ability.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so I would kind of like to see maybe a revisiting of like cities as a whole. But overall, I would say I'm more excited to get my hands on that for kit bashing than because
Sure.
I'm
That makes
really
sense.
hyped for any sort of new Cities of Sigmar release.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I felt a little weird seeing they almost looked like I was gonna say the STLs that they showed us. Um,
Yeah.
I felt a little weird with them. I wasn't that into bits of that aesthetic. I just making the good guys hyper religious humans, like they did that,
No.
So
Yeah.
I don't want that. Um, the thing that I both liked and disliked about Cities of Sigmar was that it was room for all of the Tolkien enthusiast models in terms of Dispossessed just being sort of the original Games Workshop take on Tolkien dwarves, and Wanderers being the original Games Workshop take on Mirkwood people, um, and it cities kind of being the home for all the Tolkien things. Because I think if you're gonna have a fantasy miniatures game, um, the kind of D&D Tolkien expectation of what a fantasy world looks like kind of hangs over your head, and I love that
Yeah.
AOS has gotten away from it, but um but I recognize that there are people who want the most vanilla thing, and that's not a bad thing. When it comes to actual ice cream, I actually probably eat vanilla ice cream more than any other. I usually eat it as a topping on like pie. But
Yeah.
I don't want like Rocky Road on my pie because you know, there's other things that are exciting. So like with Lumineth, I remember people being really upset about how not vanilla high elves the Lumineth were. And
Yeah.
so I kind of wish that Cities of Sigmar instead just updated here's our take on Tolkien, and we're just gonna silo it into Cities of Sigmar, and that's it. Um,
Yeah. I
but that's
think
not where
that
they're going.
also like Cities of Sigmar is the haven for all the Total War Warhammer players.
Yep, yeah, uh-huh,
Because it's all the Warhammer Fantasy players and all the Mordheim players.
uh-huh, yeah,
Because it's those older sculpts, the ones that are more likely carried over from the fantasy line, and it's
hmm
all the thing. Like we don't have, for example, my warband is dark elves, so it's just like
hmm
it's just themed after being fantasy dark elves, and we don't
yeah,
really have fantasy dark elves anymore, but we have like anvil guards.
hmm
So
yeah. All right. So let's get into Underworlds. So we've seen the Loon Court. You already kind of said you're thinking this kind of skull with antlers situation. You're thinking that this is probably a Malarian shadow elf.
Yep, it looks really similar to all of the dark. I have dark elves that have shields that,
Okay.
minus the antlers, basically have that exact same like skull, kind of over-designed skull symbol on them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it's very. I would be shocked if it's not some form of dark elf or dark elf inspired.
Okay.
Maybe it's not Malarian, maybe it's like Daughters of Cain, or, but I
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, you know, take with a grain of salt, but I know we have been getting rumors that Malarian is going to be making his appearance in Age
Yep.
of Sigmar fairly soon. And he's one of those like kind of major-ish characters that has been around like in the lore snippets
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, since the beginning of Age of Sigmar, but we haven't
Absolutely.
ever really seen anything substantial with him in terms of like a model or like a battle tome or anything like that.
They've really strung the fans along, or the Dark Elf fans along, by like I think in 2019, probably the number one guess for what was coming in 2020 was more Dark Elves, or like finally Dark Elves. And then in 2020, everyone's like, okay, well, it's not coming this year, but 2021 is going to be the year of Malarian. And, and I
Yeah.
think it's just been next year, this is what we're going to get. And now I'm still hearing people unironically say, hey, Malarian 2024 is going to happen. Um, but I do think it could happen finally this time. I don't know what I want to see from it. Um, I've heard the name Shadow Elves, or like Shadow Demon Elves, and I hope, I guess, that they kind of go the direction that Nighthaunt went in terms of aesthetically, like wispiness. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking like almost like grasping shadows, or like the way, um, yeah, just like sort of the way Nighthaunt has wisps trailing behind them. I would almost want elves with wisps coming from them, like going towards you.
Yeah.
I guess is my only aesthetic note. Mechanically, I don't really care.
Yeah.
But
I could I could almost see like kind of the opposite direction, have them be kind of bulky elves.
mm,
Because the mask and like the aesthetic kind of reminds me of the Wild Hunt from like The Witcher, uh,
okay.
where it's like these grim, dark, like spoiler alert, they are elves. Like these grim, dark, like heavy, almost like chaos armored like
Okay.
entities with like skull masks and stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure. I know that that outline really makes me think of Kanan from Kanan's Reapers
Mm,
too.
mm-hmm.
So something like that, like a big dude with an axe.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and the only other thing I have to say on Underworlds is the community wants these so bad. GW, I know, is not listening, but this has got to be the number one thing you would hope we see in a Tome of Champions. I
Yes.
think what we're actually going to see in a Tome of Champions, if we get one, is just all of the faction narrative quests. Because again, it just feels like 2.0 was designed by people who think that Warcry is a narrative only game. And I love the new narrative rules that we've gotten. They are incredible. I think that campaigns are really, really fun in this edition, and I have no critiques other than like a couple artifacts that are problematic. But um, casual players need good matched play rules. Like that's just
Yes.
Casual play requires good match play rules. It's just a
I
thing that GW needs to learn to
Yep.
understand.
And I consider I mean, even though like I'm on the Discord, I'm oftentimes like tuning lists or like, we
Mm-hmm.
did the whole deep dive on Slanesh last year.
Yep.
Um, or I guess 2021. I still consider myself a casual player.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't touch narrative at all.
Right.
I just play
Hmm.
pickup matched play games for the most part, but I
Hmm.
don't, not all of my lists are tuned to win every game.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good note for GW that they'll never see, but it's worth.
Never see. They're not watching this far into this video. No way.
No, they're not. Um, all right, so let's talk about the second half of the year. So we we talked a little bit about what we want to see from Cities of Sigmar. Is there
Right.
anything specifically Dawnbringer Crusades? Because the thing that we've kind of heard is that it is going to be focused on just the
Yep.
Crusades. Is there any like anything
Uh,
that you want from those or that you're excited about, nervous about?
the only thing would be Sisters of Sigmar.
Okay, tell me more.
Which Sisters of Sigmar, I believe, I don't know too much about them. They're essentially battle nuns. Basically, they're the Warhammer, the Age of Sigmar
Hmm.
Warhammer Fantasy version of Sisters of Battle from Warhammer 40K.
Hmm.
Kind of a similar aesthetic, kind of that like gothic, like battle heavy armor battle nun
Yeah.
feel. Um, and I believe they were from Mordheim primarily.
Okay.
I believe they were a Mordheim warband, which would also be great because like there are a lot of people who still really like Mordheim or
Uh-huh.
who want to see or who want to be able to
Yeah.
take kind of more of that like witch hunter, Mordheim, grungy, like street level type in warbands.
Hmm.
Um, that would be my only thing really. Like I said, I think neither of us are like incredibly excited about Dawnbringer Crusades.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just a little nervous about them. This picture that I've got on the screen of a Dawnbringer Crusade could easily be a 40K picture, and that's the main thing I don't like
yeah.
about them is it's a little bit too 40K for me, but it's fine. I wouldn't mind a big release that I'm not trying to buy. That would
Yeah,
be
same.
nice.
Wallet could take a break.
Um, so let's talk about the second season of Warcry 2.0. They've hinted, or at least they've written their Warcom articles as if, seasons are just a part of this Warcry edition. So what would you want to see from a second season?
Um, exactly not what you have up there,
Labyrinth
which is
battles?
Catacombs 2.0.
Yeah, same.
I think Catacombs is cool. I think if they did Catacombs 2.0, and I think you're right, it feels way too inevitable.
Hmm.
You said it feels too inevitable to be real. I think it's way too inevitable that they don't just do it. Although,
Yeah,
counterpoint to that, I will say that I believe Catacombs actually did not do super well. I
it
think
did
that
not.
sold really poorly, but that was
There is still
also,
catacombs at my local game store.
yeah,
Hmm.
that was also like a kind of botched release schedule in the middle of the pandemic. So
True.
argue, however much that had to do with it, but I would say maybe they're hesitant to do another Catacombs. I think that the alternating terrain placement thing ruins it for me. It's just so much
Interesting.
setup for your Warcry board.
Yeah, I've never played any of the Kill Team Labyrinth boards. They don't look like something I'd want to do, but they went all in for Labyrinth stuff in Kill
Yeah.
Team. Um,
And I wouldn't be surprised to see something more like that as opposed to Catacombs, where it's like walls and corridors and this like
yeah.
space Hulk feel, except, in like a crypt or this, I guess it'd be this Seraphon ship.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's likely. Um, we could also, it seems less likely just because they really themed 2.0 around Gur, but we could also shift to like Olgu or shift to a different plane
Hmm.
halfway through the season. Which, depending on how we're putting seasons, an Underworld season does usually change planes or change locations fairly majorly.
It does.
So there's always, and it's possible, since they set Underworlds in the same place as Warcry right now,
Uh-huh.
It's possible we'll probably see the new Underworld season before we see the second season of Warcry 2.0. It's possible that we can infer maybe they're staying in the same place.
Hmm.
So whatever the new Underworld season looks like might be a good first indicator of where Warcry might move to eventually.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is there's like a tiny mentioned paragraph that I wasn't able to find in these 2 seconds while you were talking, but of gnarl oaks that sort of their roots move around, right? Because they're like grasping and trying to eat things.
Right.
Um, and they create caves, but they're like tree-made caves. So I was thinking one potential instead of a Seraphon labyrinth would be sort of a multi-level, um, board where you can end up under the gnarl oaks. Though, as I say it,
Be
it would just be too
interesting.
expensive. They would never sell it for less than $500 in terms
I
of how
think that
much
was,
terrain you would need.
yeah, 4D Warcry.
Yeah.
I think that's also I do kind of remember hearing something about that. Again, probably can't go look for it right now, in the interest of time. But I think that might be where Gnarlwood is set for
I
Warhammer
think so.
Underworlds.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is that they are kind of doing that, but with Warhammer, all these Warhammer Underworld stuff going on in like these
Hmm.
tree caves, and then above ground you have the Warcry stuff
Sure.
going on at the
Okay.
same time. But yeah, it'd be interesting to watch. It would be interesting if they just switched places for the second season, for the new seasons for
Oh
both, where the
yeah.
Warcry goes underground and the Underworld stuff comes up, and you have these like gnarl oaks maybe
Hmm.
influencing the Warhammer Underworlds board. I don't know that,
Yeah.
but
So
yeah,
yeah, I guess my main hope is that we don't get Catacombs 2.0, and I do think that that
yeah,
is what we're gonna get. So let's focus on something that I am much more hopeful about and much more into, which is um, let's first talk allies. So
yes.
I think we both love the allies that they've created for Warcry. What
Yep.
would you pick if you were going to add them to other grand alliances? What would you be into?
First off, before we can have a conversation about allies, my number one ally wish of like, and when we say allies, I think to clarify, we mean the Ogroid Myrmidon, the Mindstealer Spheranx, and the Fomoroid Crusher, and now the Centaurian Marshal, as
Hmm.
opposed to a hero from another warband,
Right, right.
correct?
Hmm.
First off, ban all monsters. They're terrible. Get them out of here. These should be what
The
monsters are
allies
in
are the
Warcry.
monsters.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they
Yep.
should be what monsters are in Warcry. So make them monsters, whatever. Maybe give them triple activate. I don't know. Like however you want to do that.
Hmm.
Then wishes for other. I think order should definitely get some. Um, I don't know. Like order is hard. I mean, like a griffin.
Hmm.
A griffin sounds like something for order that they could do. I don't know if we've gotten like just straight up griffins in the setting.
I don't think
Um,
we have.
because there
No,
are griffs and but I know griffins were a thing in. I know griffins were a thing in
because there's still the Cities of Sigmar
fantasy.
guy who rides one, right? It's
Yeah,
a really old sculpt, but it does exist. It is in the AOS canon, as it were. So there
yeah,
are griffins in canon. We haven't gotten an updated model in, since I've
yep.
been an adult.
So I think a griffin would be cool. You could also go kind of the route like have like a baby Charybdis or a baby
Hmm.
Hydra.
Sure.
Or I mean, probably the most likely option would be some sort of Seraphon monster.
Oh, sure. Like a
Like
really
something
big
bigger.
Kroxigor. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe something bigger than a cold one, but smaller than a Carnosaur. A new
Okay.
salamander, maybe. I know that's maybe
Hmm.
something that's being rumored is happening is like a new salamander sculpt.
Oh, you know
Um,
what? I was totally blanking before, but on that Battle Tome roadmap, I bet that is what we see for that spring order Battle Tome
oh,
is
Seraphon.
is
Yeah,
Seraphon.
that would make sense.
And that would work
'Cause-
too well because they just made a Seraphon Warcry
Yep.
warband, and yep.
that would
Hmm.
need rule, that would get rule. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think like a Seraphon I mean, again, especially because the entire season is kind of based around finding this Seraphon ship.
Hmm.
And there were mentions, I remember that there were mentions in there, and I think that they were mentions when I think this was from the preview article about Hunters of Huanchi.
Hmm.
They talked about how the breeding pools in the ship kind of produced, that's where these hunters came from, but that the chameleon skink ones, and I think whatever the ones the Terra wings came from, were
Uh-huh.
the only ones that worked properly,
Yep.
and that the other ones either just were non-functional or kind of produced like these like wild like monsters basically.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that would be like a big, like you were talking about, like maybe a big like malformed Croxagore,
Sure. Hmm.
um, or like like a even just like a like a big like malformed Saurus or
Right, right.
something, like an
Yeah.
ogroid sor a Sorgor. I don't know, like
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like some sort of like Seraphon monster that maybe spawned from these malfunctioning spawning pools.
Absolutely.
Would be
And then
interesting.
there's also, I think, a mention in the Sundered Fate box or somewhere of the Saurus that were on the ship are still in the ruins. So we could
Oh,
get, something like that. Um,
interesting. Yeah.
my thing, I wrote here the bones from beneath the gnarl oaks for death. So all the gnarl oaks they gave us are like perched on top of these big monster bones.
Yeah.
And I just feel like if I were an enterprising necromancer walking into the gnarlwood, the first thing I would look at is like, wow, those are some sweet bones under those gnarl oaks. I wonder if I can raise them. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, they're huge, right? I mean, they'd be bigger than a terror guy. So you'd have to have something smaller than that, but some
Yeah.
sort of like hulking giant, like, creature skeleton, like a beast skeleton. Think of like almost if there was like a predatory rhinoceros skeleton. I'm thinking of like the
Yeah.
types of monsters that in Magic the Gathering just get the beast keyword.
Baloths.
Yeah,
Baloths.
Baloths.
Yeah.
Exact. So,
There's precedent for it too. Which I know like the Myrmidon is based off, so I don't think all of them are, but like the Myrmidon is based off something. There's uh what is it? The AOS, the like endless spell, the Kronspine incarnate, I
oh
think it
yes.
is.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like just
Yeah.
give me something like that that I can play in Warcry for
Yeah.
death,
So
but
give
like
me
death themed.
yeah. So give me like a beastie creature. Doesn't have to be like anything that exists on Earth, but then it's just the skeletons. And importantly for me, I want like gnarl oak saplings still kind of clinging to its back.
Yes.
I just want like kind of
Yes.
these weird gnarl oak trees with a few of the claws coming out of its back, but then otherwise it's this skeletal beast creature, about the size of a Mind Stealer Sphinx. And that's what I want for my Death War bands, of which I only have one. But that's what I want for them in general. Uh, I think would be really cool. What would you want from destruction? It's almost difficult for me because the possibilities are so infinite because
It's
we're in Gur.
yeah, you could have anything, pretty much any of the monsters,
Hmm.
I think I think you have it here. Oh, I thought we had it
I
on here
wrote two different
somewhere.
things for destruction.
Yeah, I'm
One was
looking.
the
The bird
bird.
from the trailer. Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one that I was thinking of. I want that bird. That bird was
Hmm.
cool. Like a big, like kind of cockatrice looking bird. Yeah, that would probably be my wish. That'd probably be my wish.
The bird hooked me immediately when I saw that
Yep,
trailer, and I was
me too.
so angry when they didn't have it anywhere. It
Yeah.
was like
Does it even have a name?
part cockatrice, part phoenix, part like rock from like Middle Eastern mythology of just like that
Yeah.
giant vulture evil or vulture eagle. Um, just it looked
I don't
so
think
compelling. I want it
yeah, I
so
don't think they
bad.
even gave it a name.
They didn't. They never gave it a name. Yeah, we have no idea. I want that. Um,
Yeah.
I want to read you a um, so there was a thing on the map in the first here. Viewers might be able to see this, I don't know. On the first map, there was something called spine crawler webs that was never given an explanation. And a lot of people connected it to Gloomspite Gits, and a lot of people said, "Oh my God, we're gonna get Spider Rider re-sculpts." I think that ship has sailed, but they finally in the Sundered Fate book gave it a little blurb, and I want to read it to you because I think this would make a really cool. This could work for destruction or death.
Okay.
Those who stray into the spine-crawler web seldom ever emerge. Here, the corpses of long-dead gnarl oaks have been wound with hair-thin threads, transformed into a nightmarish cat's cradle of glistening webs. This is the dwelling place of the infamous spine crawlers, web-spinning arthropods, not arachnoids. Yeah, with 1,000 segmented legs that like to attach themselves to the backs of their victims, burrowing through armor and flesh to extract the marrow from their bones. Uh,
Okay.
so it would be like silkworm millipede monsters.
Yeah, I was thinking, from the name, like spine crawlers, it
Hmm.
sounds like I think like part of it was that they were talking about it burrows into like that region, but
Yep.
also it probably looks kind of like a spine.
Oh, yep. So do you
Um,
think this would work better for death?
I think it would work. I think it could work for either. I think it's a little bit too gruesome and like too brutal to be destruction.
Sure.
Destruction usually isn't like burrowing into, like the victim's flesh.
When they go gruesome, it's like they do it, they still play the gruesomeness for horror. Like everything about Ogre Maw Tribes is really gruesome, but or
Yeah.
sorry, it's not for horror, it's for humor. Like Maw
Yeah.
Tribes is super gruesome, but it's not scary gruesome.
No.
It's played for laughs.
I
Yeah.
think these would probably be like kind of centipede looking things
Hmm.
where it's like kind of a centipede. It's kind of a millipede but angrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see it even having like a skull face or something. Like, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That sounds like a really cool like chaotic beast or ally for death for
Hmm.
sure.
You're right. Chaotic Beast version might work better just because if they're climbing onto people's backs, it feels like if they were much bigger than a humanoid, that wouldn't work really well.
Yeah. It'd
Um,
be cool if you could like, because death has a lot of cool tricks around death, like the
hmm.
necromancer thing.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if it kills a model, you can like maybe it has to be a quad, but like it gets like maybe an extra attack action, and if it
Hmm.
kills whatever it's attacking, you can choose to like exchange it for the model that you just took
Because it
down.
climbed into its spine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be
totally.
really
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Absolutely. All right, GW, we fixed it for you. There's your new thing. Get your sculptors on it.
Yeah, this is we. I think we've laid out a good. If any Warcry devs, any higher ups at GW are listening, which they're not, we've laid out a very good like release pattern for you.
Yep.
Warcry not dead game. Please FAQ. Thank you.
All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is, do you have any like wishes or predictions for the community? Any personal tabletop goals? I'll start us off. Uh, I wish for the rise of the Jank Lords. And by that I mean when I go to a Warcry tournament or when I look at the lists in a Warcry tournament, I see a decent amount of lists that are this person is wanting to win the tournament, and that's cool. I see a lot of lists that are here's some stuff. It's not really tuned or focused. It's just like here's some stuff. I'm putting one box warbands into that because one box warbands are not tuned, like bespoke warbands
Sure.
are not tuned or focused. But you see a lot of people who have brought like AOS warbands with that same kind of energy. Um,
Right.
and
Like
then
here's my like random models that like I took from my AOS army,
yeah, yeah.
basically.
Um, and yeah, it'll be like a leader that has a bad combat profile because of an ability, but then they didn't take the thing that combos with the ability. And that's
Yep.
fine. That's not against them or anything. It's just like that's what's happening, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then you usually see a couple people who are playing a bad faction and they've tuned it really far and they're just like, what can I do with this awful faction? I'm not here to win the tournament, but I'm just like, I'm going as hard as I can with
I
this terrible
A-
faction.
AKA me in every game that I play, but do we consider Slanesh demons to be a bad faction now?
They're
And I
not
would argue
quite bad
no, but
enough.
that's another video.
They've fallen from their heights, but they're not quite bad enough to be bad.
I would say
Um,
middle of the pack.
yeah. But what you don't really see is I haven't seen like meme lists or like wild combos that aren't some of the more powerful combos in the game. Um,
Yeah,
like I've never seen someone go with like a Bloodstoker Korgorath list. Although I
right.
think that might have legs. Or, you just I have a three Storm Fiend list, right? That's
Hmm.
just very silly, and it's just got three Storm Fiends in it. Um, you don't see a lot of those warbands that are really tuned, but not tuned to be the best, to not tuned in hopes of being the best warband at the tournament, that are just tuned to do their cool thing. Um,
Yeah.
and that's something I just wish for the community. I I get a ton of joy in that kind of thing. I don't haven't done it because I like weirdly feel pressure as a content creator. Like supposed to be illuminating parts of the metagame that people aren't playing, or like I'm supposed to be, showing people how to win, since that's what most people tune into content to learn about. But like, if I were left up to my own devices, these are the types of lists that I would take to events. And I want to see the Jank Masters. I want to see them come out. So that's my wish for the community.
I yeah. I think I'll say right off the bat that I think that one of the biggest reasons for that is I think there's so many interesting abilities that are just locked away behind quads.
That's true.
And
Hmm.
I think I don't think they've ever figured out how to balance abilities around the fact that like the leap if there is one downside to the way that like abilities and the way that the initiative system works in Warcry is that the leap from triple to quad is massive.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because triple you can make every single game, and mostly if you don't roll very statistically unlikely, you can make a triple every battle round.
Yep. Yep.
A
I think it's
quad,
3% chance of not being able to get a triple in a battle round.
yep.
Hmm.
I don't know. Have you done the math on quads? It's less than once per
37%.
game.
I didn't do it, but it's your likelihood for a given round. If you're willing to use a wild dice, it's 37%.
Okay.
But rolling a natural quad is like once every 3 or 4 games, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so they're very
Um,
hard to make happen. Hmm.
Yeah, so I think a lot of interesting abilities are locked behind quads, and then there's the fact that if you do roll a quad, oftentimes it's just better to rampage.
Yep.
I think a lot of the cities of Sigmar warbands suffer from that. I think there's some really interesting quads,
Hmm.
especially the wizards. I think the wizard units have some really interesting quads on different members, but they're just never better than rampage, and you don't
Yep.
roll them much anyway. Um, but yeah, I think there's something for meme lists I'll put out there, and I know I don't remember who. Some other people have been talking about it. The White Dwarf rules that we got for the Gnarl Spirit pack.
Hmm.
They, as one of their
Yes.
abilities or
Okay.
reactions, they
Uh-huh.
turn into beasts.
Uh-huh.
And so anything that like I think I think the Skaven and also the Untamed beasts both have the like any beast it gets an extra attack
Yep.
basically.
Hmm.
So playing around with that could be fun. I think that'd be funny.
Packmaster combos that aren't about rat ogres. Uh,
The
it's
best.
it's too like easy to go into Packmaster Rat Ogre, but I definitely think a master molder whipping something that's like a chaos spawn or something else could be fun like that.
Yeah.
Um, but you made a great point about the rampage or the quads that I just wanted to piggyback on. It's not, there's a lot of fun stuff about Warcry list building, but building around quads just isn't fun. Like, I
No.
could find myself building around something that's not likely to happen and trying to make it happen, but I need some agency in making it happen more often. So like triples that require really difficult positioning can be fun. Like, um, I really enjoy building around AoE buff triples, for example. Um, but they're either good or they're bad, kind of. But either way, it's
Mhm.
so so it doesn't feel like I'm sort of meme listing when I build around them. Um, but yeah, you can't build around a quad because it's not fun to just never
Yeah.
roll the thing that your warband is
It
supposed to
becomes
do.
less like, will this thing happen and not be good, and more like, will this thing even happen at all?
Right, exactly. I'm much more
Yeah,
interested in building around something that might happen and not be good, but I can make sure it happens
yeah.
than something that might just never
So
happen.
yeah, wishes, more interesting doubles and triples.
Hmm.
Right off the bat. And I think, like, again, just to illustrate that point, the last video that I did with you, I was singing the Contorted Epitome's praises and how great the model is, which is still
Hmm.
great, and how great the profile is, which is still great. I ditched the Epitome from my Slanesh list.
Because it's a quad now. Yeah. It went from the
Because it's a
best
quad
triple
now,
in the
and because
game.
of counter, but
Yeah.
we're not gonna touch that. I picked up a Varengard, which is toughness 6 and like strength 6 or strength 5, and has the double to give it a bunch of attacks.
Everything about the current edition is telling you to take Varengard type models
Varengard,
over
yes.
contorted epitome type models.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
A
so yeah, and I think that that also really just limits jank to,
hmm yeah.
um, yeah,
Okay. Fair enough. Well, anyone who's bummed out about our it's tough to make jank happen, take
make it
this as a
happen.
challenge. Make it happen,
Make
please.
it happen. Absolutely. There are so many. We didn't even go over all the interesting abilities. Like there's still so many there still are interesting doubles and triples. I think
Hmm.
Nurgle Mortals has one that has a guy that steals move speed from people permanently.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
I think I think Dark Oath Savagers have the one that gives extra wild dice.
Sure.
I think they also have like something that buffs stats permanently.
They do.
Ogre Thaumaturge has something that buffs its stats permanently. Like there's a lot of really interesting abilities in the game that are like niche, and you have to go looking through like the compendium to find them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they do exist.
Yeah. So I want more people building around those. More people like the art of building a warband that might go 3-in-1 is
Hmm.
sort of it's almost a really compelling warband that's 2-in-2 but might go 3-in-1. I find uh, is sort of more skill intensive than building a warband that's a 3-in-1 warband that might go 4-0.
Right.
At least
Yeah.
personally, I find it more interesting. But uh, yeah, that's what I want for the community. What about do you have any hobby goals?
Yes, I do. My one other want for the community is for people to start playing Slanesh Demons because I think they're still really good, and we didn't get a lot of tournaments back when they were amazing.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of people know that they were amazing in 1.0 and so are very disappointed by them in 2.0. But I
Yep.
think Fiends are still like absolutely best in show.
Hmm.
I think they're the best. I think they're honestly one of the best units for that price point. As far as personal tabletop goals, ironically, from what I just said, I'm getting away from Slanesh. I'm sick of painting purple. Um,
Uh-huh.
I next thing is Chaos Legionnaires for me. After Chaos Legionnaires, I want to combine kind of two ideas of that. I want to do something that is more good guys, because I don't have a lot of those
Hmm.
and I just like having variety. I want to do something bioluminescence,
Okay.
or like very glowy.
And
And
bioluminescent good guys. you're thinking.
Yeah, as
Okay.
like a painting challenge slash I just think this would be really cool. I haven't quite narrowed down what that will look like yet. It might
Mm-hmm.
take me a while. I might see what's in some of these other boxes, like some of these other boxes that are coming out.
Yeah.
I was originally kind of thinking Living City, but I'm not super sold on their rules, and I'm not really sure how to do bioluminescence with like what essentially are just a bunch of elves in armor.
Right.
Um,
I think
yeah,
it's probably like I think about those painting competition pieces that are a miniature that's supposed to be at night and then it's OSL coming from their lamp,
yeah,
but the OSL is like their fins or some or
yeah,
like a body part.
yeah,
Um, I think that's what the execution probably looks like, but
probably.
painting a miniature that is colors in shadow as opposed to just black is like so difficult.
It
That's
really
going to be a
is.
cool project. That's going to be
Yeah.
a real challenge, but I think a good challenge. That's cool.
Yeah, and then my only other thing, I don't even know if I'm getting to this year. I have two homebrew ideas. So
Mm-hmm.
I really want to create my own FOMO box for Warcry.
Okay.
And I want to do
That's ambitious.
homebrew rules and
Okay.
homebrew warbands. And the ideas that I have is a fifth chaos god who's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like Great Horned Rat, Hashut level of like not quite being a major player, but
Mm-hmm.
not being so minor that like they're just forgotten about or kind of more on the level of just a demon prince.
Yeah.
Um, and my idea for that is the chaos god of sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea would be having sorrowful demons, which I haven't quite completely settled on an aesthetic, and it could change before, it could change at any moment. But possibly moth demons
Oh, okay.
um, is kind of where that seems to be heading at the moment, is like moth demon, and I think that would be demons.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other idea for kind of opposing them are demon hunters
Okay.
who again, aesthetic not completely fleshed out yet. I don't know if they would be like a witch hunter style, more like a Stormcast Eternal, or like more of just like a classic knight look, or
Mm-hmm.
something completely different from that. But the basic idea being that they have actually contracted with demons to gain power to fight demons, with the idea being that there's this great game being played. And
Sure.
so, like the demon wants to corrupt them, but it's not like it's going to refuse the contract because, hey, like you're going to go kill, I'm a demonette that you're contracting with, and you're going
Uh-huh.
to go use my crab claws to kill a bunch of bloodletters,
Sure, sure.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a interesting space that has a lot of room for development, and it's going to just come down to artistic talent at some point, and
Uh-huh.
available kits as well as STL files.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. That sounds awesome. Well,
Yeah.
mine is a lot less exciting than that. Mine is I'm trying to make a resolution this year to only buy and paint things for factions that I've already got because I keep branching out into new ones because I keep wanting to do a little bit of everything
Yep.
and it needs to stop. So I need to focus on taking the stuff that I've got and either just like finishing painting backlog, which is boring, but is
Hmm.
something everyone needs to do,
Yes.
or if I'm gonna get a new model, it's got to be on something that, I've already got some stuff for. So,
Sure.
like I think I'm gonna get a Fomeroid Crusher, but that's because specifically I think it'll be good in a couple of my Chaos warbands. And so then I'm gonna get a Fomeroid Crusher and paint it in a paint scheme that is kind of halfway between two of the Chaos warbands that I've got, and then hopefully it'll be able to kind of slot into either one without looking weird. Um,
That makes
so
sense.
things like that are what I'm
Yeah.
hoping to do this year. I'm allowed to buy one of the Warcry versus boxes because, um, you know, I need more. I like this Gur terrain, even though I actually hate painting the bamboo. Um,
Oh
it's
no.
awful. It's it's not the bamboo, it's the rope straps that hold all the bamboo together in random
Oh,
places. So you can't just paint bamboo. You like paint bamboo and then come back and tag every rope strap, and then you have to worry about, do you want to highlight it so that it looks like a rope, that it's clearly meant to be a rope, but you'd have to like do a lot of anyway. So I don't like
yeah.
the bamboo on these platforms, but otherwise I really like them. Um, so I'll probably just get one more box for the terrain and for I play Corn and I play Slanesh, so getting one of those two fighters. I'll probably wait to see the uh, Nightmare Quest,
Yeah.
and then if I like Nightmare Quest more than Blood Hunt, I'll get it. Otherwise, I'm sure Blood Hunt will still be around and I'll be able
I
to
think
get it.
Yeah, I think that's basically my plan for buying things too, is to aim to do it at kind of the end of the summer.
Yeah.
Um,
So
what factions do you already have, just for people who might be wondering what you're sticking to?
um, I have a solid third of the factions in the game.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so Stormcast, Flesh Eater Courts, Gloomspite Gits, although I'll never paint Gloomspite again because I hate assembling them. Uh, if I could buy a pre-assembled Gabapalooza, I would get it.
Sure.
Uh, Nurgle, only the demons though, no mortals. Darko Savagers, Tarantulos, Brood, Slanesh demons and mortals, Khorne demons and mortals, Sylvaneth, Caradhran overlords, Iron Jaws, and and Tzeentch and Lumineth because I got the Arcane Cataclysm box
Right.
for no reason. And um, there was a reason. It was like steeply discounted, and I just kind of impulsively did it. And
Yeah.
I like Tzeentch a lot, or Tzeentch Mortals. I don't love Tzeentch Demons, but I like Tzeentch Mortals a lot, so I don't feel bad about it. But that kind of impulse of just getting something because it's on sale, it's got to stop. So no more of that.
Yeah. I just found the Seraphon Warhammer Underworlds and the Warcry box of the Splintered Fang both for half off. So I just impulse bought some stuff that I'm probably not going to do anything with for a while.
Yeah. Although Splintered Fang are cool, and their leader is a hot pick for an ally right now. So,
That's true. I already have
um,
one of her painted though.
oh, funny. All right. You're probably not
I,
going to
I now have
use
three. I
two.
bought the double box back in the day, so now I have three full completed sets of Splinter Fang.
Oh man. Well, when they get buffs, you are going to be laughing. That's going to be
Yeah,
great.
exactly. I'm going to be able to build every single configuration of Splintered Fang that my heart desires.
That's going to be perfect. I'm so happy for you. Um,
Yep.
Man, that's so funny, me being like, oh yeah, their leader, great ally, and you've already got two.
Yep. One painted, one that I have not touched
Oh wow. Okay.
since I bought her like 2 years ago.
Well, everything comes around. I'm sure Splintered Fang is going to be really good eventually. They were good in 1.0 though, so they're not allowed to be good in 2.0, but then I'm
That's
sure
true.
in 3 they'll be back to being good again.
Yep.
All right, well, that's all I've got. I think it's going to be a year of a lot of stuff. Um, 2022 was definitely the biggest year that Warcry's had, and as much as everyone in the Discord loves to talk about it being a dead game, I think that's more the natural inclination for Warcry players to have a bit of a little brother complex talking. I
Yeah.
don't think it's rooted in reality.
To both AOS and Kill Team.
Yes, exactly. It's
Um,
AOS community has a little brother complex about 40K,
yep.
and I feel like it's nothing compared. Like Warcry is the splinter of that community that feels it even more.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think
yeah.
that like if you really look and like rationalize and like actually sit down and look at everything that came out in 2022, I would sum up 2022 as the year that they got their Warcry release schedule back on track from all the
Hmm.
delays that we had. I think everything pretty much everything since Warcry came out originally was like in the middle of the pandemic and just got really delayed. The GA
Hmm.
books got leaked and then got delayed.
Yep.
On Catacombs got delayed. I believe Red Harvest got delayed.
Hmm.
And so you ended up with situations like Tome of Champions 2021 getting
Yep.
like printing error or what have you and getting delayed, and then only being legal for 6 months. And then now we all want Underworlds fighters again, even though, it's not clear. It's not, nothing on that is clear at all.
Right.
Just, you know what? If you're looking for permission to run your Underworlds fighters, just ask your tournament organizer. And I say just run them. For casual play, just run them.
For the tournament I'm running in 2 weeks, I can't be bothered to tell people that they can't play there. Like if someone shows up with one, I'm not gonna kick them out. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not mentioning them anywhere in the tournament pack because I'd prefer that nobody brings one. But if someone does, I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not gonna
I think
kick someone out. That'd be
I
crazy.
I want to say that the only one that's potentially just completely broken in 2.0 is maybe Mollog, I think, but I haven't even looked at him
Oh,
recently, so
interesting. I think
yeah,
the
I don't know.
Sylvaneth ones that are Kurnothi are just pointed the way elves used to be pointed, and so they're just
Mhm.
like way less points than they would be now. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're broken because
And it
um
definitely like doesn't matter as much
right.
when we're just talking about units that you inherently by the rules can't spam. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Hmm.
Underworlds. Where is it? Just in case there's like that one, just in case there's like that one game dev who like looks at this video, goes, I don't want to watch a 2 hour long video, and just skips to the end.
Yep,
Like, guy, come on. Warhammer Underworlds rules in Warcry again for everything.
please.
Reprint the models too while we're at it. Re-release all the old models. You can update their rivals decks even.
I'm adding a new wish to my wish list. Next time they do Warcry boxes, it needs to be instead of two AOS boxes smushed together, it needs to be an Underworld's Warband smushed to an AOS Battle Line box.
Yes.
A Battle Line sprue, or maybe half a Battle Line sprue smushed to an Underworld's Warband, and have the points work out to 1,000
All
points.
with updated 2.0 fighter cards.
Yes, please. That is
Just release card packs again. More
That would be
2.0
my
fighter
number
cards.
one thing that they could release would be an Underworld's Warband smushed to an AOS with all the cards for both.
Yep. That would definitely be a shut up and take my money.
Yep, absolutely. I would definitely cancel my New Year no army resolution. So on that note, it's been wonderful to have you. This was super fun.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, any parting shots?
Uh, Go check me out on Instagram, the lovely Medusa. I post a lot of my painting stuff there, as well as pictures of my reptiles, all my pets. So yeah, check that out and play Slanesh Demons and Warcry. Come on, the tournament. Come on, we got to get at least 6 wins for Slanesh.
We have only seen, so I've been scraping tournament data lately for a project I want to complete in February, but there are 6 competitive games for Slanesh Mortals and 3 for
Boy.
Slanesh Demons, and that is it. And meanwhile, Soulblight Gravelords has 70. So,
But if you take, so there's 6 Slanesh Mortal games, and
yep,
if you add the 3 demons, that's 9.
yeah, so many. So,
Yeah,
um,
but
so,
also 6-9. I'll take it.
oh, okay, yes,
I'll take it.
all right, nice. On that note, may all of everyone's rolls be crits.